Is this thing on?
What is up, everyone? My name is Alex, aka Doer, and we are back with another episode of Doers Take Breaks, where we invite a guest, talk all things MMA, and jump into the world of collectibles. Today, I have a very familiar face to a lot of the guys that I have the pleasure of conversating with all the time. None other than Eric Larson, the UFC Card Father. Eric,
What's up, dude?
how are you?
What's up? I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing very well. It's been an exciting day, for sure. I'm having a good
Tell
time, and
us. Tell the story.
tell the story.
Tell.
We might as well
Fanatics
plug it in,
live.
right? Well, this is episode. It's definitely not about me, but folks, we are filming this on May 31st. The Dana White versus Ruben showdown just went down on Fanatics Live. And for those that were in there, they might have seen this. And for those that haven't, I will be posting some content about this. But there was a cool opportunity to really like engage in the chat and have Dana or Ruben take a look at what you were saying and call it out. And so there was a funny moment where Dana thought that he was getting, screwed by the boxes that he was getting. So I said that he should pull a Tito Ortiz 101, and he just starts busting up on the show. And so that was funny just because he called it out. Later on, they talk about a rematch, and they're just talking about it casually, doing it at UFC 303 International Fight Week. And Dana's like, yeah, we'll set it up in my office. My guys will set up everything. And I'm in the chat. I had to throw it in there 3 times just to time the right time that he's looking at the screen. And I'm like, Dana, you should absolutely do this at the Fan Expo. He loves the idea, makes it happen basically there on the spot. And
That was crazy.
yeah, it was really cool because this is a monumental moment for the hobby as a whole, not just MMA, but because now at this Fan Expo, you have to imagine that it can become an annual thing going forward, where they start to break
100%.
these packs, and it's a really big deal. And then I start posting about it on IG, and I tag Fanatics, and then they tag me back and tag Dana. And right now we still don't know where that's going to go, but I basically shot my shot, and I was like, Dana, Fanatics, I would love to have a serious discussion about pushing this space forward. Serious inquiry, let me know. And so we'll see where that goes. Yeah. And
Great. Awesome.
Eric, when we hop on, is like, he had already seen it. So he knew why I had this goofy smile on my face.
No, congratulations. I think that was also a great event that we saw. I was really shocked that both Dana and Ruben were noticing all the comments.
Yeah.
And were connecting with the fans of not only just the sport, but collecting. And Dana was super positive and very complimentary about the midnight product.
Yeah.
The hits were not the most phenomenal hits.
Correct.
There were a couple nice ones.
They got the midnight Yuri, which was a nice one for a giveaway, and the winner takes both boxes.
Exactly.
I'm like, yikes!
What they say, that's not even a case hit; it's one of every 6 cases.
It's very rare. I will plug that in post production, but it's a very, very hard card to hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. And they hit a lot of Alex Pereira. Nice ones came out. What were some of the other notable ones that stood out?
I know they hit a Patty auto.
The Patty, yeah, that one. I mean, I think Dana was more excited because he's looking at it from like the marketability that Patty is to him versus the way that the community thinks of Patty at the moment. So it's funny because I didn't think the first few boxes were like these phenomenal monster ones, but Dana being so green into the card space, he was reacting to like Wanderlei Silva and Tito or Chuck Liddell. Like he was going off of the brand of those names and being like, oh man, these are monster boxes that you guys are making me compete against.
Exactly. I saw he got excited about Tyron Woodley, and I was about to say, what? How long's it been since he's been out of MMA and out of the UFC? But it's still a name that's big to him, and I think his view is he sees an autograph, and he was, pretty happy with all the autographs. I think it was very good because it's pretty clear that he hasn't really paid a ton of attention, let's say, in the last few years to the product. So I think it's great that he is partnering up with Topps, and a lot of the comments were coming back. People wanted to see a Dana 1 of 1 and wanted to see Dana autos and stuff like that. So it's pretty clear that the collecting community also connects with Dana.
Yeah,
And so
I love
now,
that people were in there saying bok bok and throwing like good,
uh-huh,
fortune at Chicken 101, and it was fun to see a lot of the guys that we're familiar with doing the breaks in there.
exactly.
All right, so take us back. I wanna start from the beginning. We know who you are in the space today, but a lot of folks are curious how you even got into watching MMA, the UFC. What got you into the sport? If you ever trained it. So why don't you take us back to some of the earliest memories you have of coming across what we now love?
Sure. As a kid, I was always a big fan of back then it was WWF. Became WWE, sports entertainment, fake wrestling, wrestling.
Wrestling.
My dad was a fan. My grandmother on my dad's side was a mega fan. They all grew up in Minnesota, so lots of big wrestlers came from the Minnesota area. Ended up as a kid living in Southern California, so you had the wrestling culture a little bit that came up from Mexico, the masked wrestlers, and a lot of the big wrestlers. Grew up watching Andre the Giant, watching the big guys. Ended up over the years moving in the late 70s to Pensacola, Florida. And in Pensacola, there's always been this unique wrestling community there.
Hmm.
Hulk Hogan came through there. The Armstrong brothers came through there. All of the big Samoan families, for some reason, have connection to Florida and to Pensacola. There was plenty of connections to the wrestling world. My dad was always a fan. Even when I moved out of the house as a young adult, my dad and I would always catch up with each other on Monday nights after what we had seen. So always wrestling. But over the years, spent less time watching WWE and more interested in, other forms of entertainment, other TV shows, movies, etc. But as a kid, I did a little bit of middle school wrestling. I never got to high school or anything like that, but it was always something I'd been involved in: sports, baseball, football, and a little bit of wrestling. So I guess it was sometime in I want to say the mid 90s. I couldn't put a date on it.
Yeah.
But one day I recall flipping through channels on television and picked up the WEC. This wasn't even the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think at that point the WEC was on TV routinely on one of the national cable shows. It might have been Spike TV, which is long gone, or another one. And just rekindled an interest in watching wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
But then I kind of tried to switch over to watch WWE again, and it didn't have the same feel. It was obviously kind of comical, and the Attitude Era was fun, but at that time, the WEC just looked amazing, and not only could you watch their events, but lots and lots of reruns were available to watch.
Okay.
So Fight Pass didn't exist at the time, but WC was crazy to watch. And then all of a sudden, The Ultimate Fighter was born. And that's when I really focused more on the UFC,
Mm-hmm.
and became an addict to watch as many events as possible. And even got a chance then to meet a couple fighters. I met Rashad Evans in person when he traveled through Puerto Rico. This was just a little bit after they launched the Topps product in 2009. But just became really enamored with the sport.
Yeah.
Because it felt right based upon my old wrestling experience of many, many years before. It was real as opposed to, entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I heard or read somewhere that Topps was launching a product, round one, it kind of rekindled an interest that I'd always had in collecting cards. I started collecting cards, and that may be the subject of another interview because we could take 45 minutes on that. It rekindled an interest that I had. I bought several boxes. Those were phenomenal feeling to open up boxes again,
Mm-hmm.
because it had been many, many years since I'd opened up boxes. At that time, no Facebook groups existed for UFC cards. Instagram didn't exist. there was one sole web page.
Like a forum?
Sorry?
Like a forum?
Like a forum. It was called buymmacards.com.
Okay.
No longer exists, but it was a forum set up for the earliest collectors. And it was fun to go on there every day. And there was an email option. You could get messages from people. People would do auctions. People would sell lots. People would sell individual cards, trading. It was a lot of camaraderie, a lot of friendship, and a great way to get cards. And today, there's still a few guys from those days that are around. Some of them internet famous, I'll call it, on Instagram and involved in the hobby still. Not too many involved in the UFC hobby, but several still around. So I started busting round one like there was no tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I thought I would never stop because I thought the early pricing was going to stay the same. So I was buying at $55 a box.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah, what was the original retail price for a hobby box?
It was either $55 or maybe the first ones were even $35.
Jeez. But I mean, put it into context too, right? Like that's still very affordable. But even then, that would have been what the equivalent of, like, I don't know, 60 to 70 in today's dollars.
Right. It was what I would call extremely affordable.
Yeah.
You could buy cases directly on UFC.com.
Wow.
Directly from the UFC. Obviously, you could buy them from Blowout and David Adams, and a few started hitting eBay and some other web pages that sold toys and cards and things. So I bought and I bought and I bought and I opened and I bought, and I was going back to my roots as an early collector as a kid, which is set building. I love the sport, and I didn't have a favorite fighter. So I would just go directly into set building. And so you would buy a box, and a box would have 3 autos, a few inserts or a gear and some inserts, and you'd get about 85 cards, base cards. So you could build a set almost with every box. And so I said, why not keep building boxes, building sets? And so long story short, I built a lot of sets. And I wanted to build sets of autographs, which I think a lot of people were not doing at the time. So people would open up boxes, and and they loved Chuck Liddell or GSP or Silva or Kane or you name it.
Yeah.
They would buy a box for those hits, and then they'd sell 98% of the rest of the cards
for cheap. Yeah.
And for cheap. And most people would dump them on eBay. And so I was a hoarder, and I was trying to build more sets. I got done with 1 or 2 sets, and I said, this is kind of fun. I'll buy more. I'll buy some lots along with boxes. And my wife became a fan of the sport too. So we were having a good time actually building sets and enjoying the hits, and getting a hit of a GSP auto, which obviously there weren't as many GSP autos as there were so many other fighters that you have forgotten existed today. CB Dalloway or, Matt Riddle or so many other guys. But I wanted those as well because I wanted to build sets.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I never stopped, kept buying and buying and buying. The last time I recall actually buying a box, they were selling for $275. And I thought that was insanity. Boxes had gone up 5 times.
Yeah.
It's insanity. I'm not going to buy any more. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to buy any more. And like the next week, round 2 hit.
Oof.
Because both round 1 and round 2 are in 2009. So rinse, repeat. I did the same thing. John Jones autos, GSP autos, red ink autos,
yeah.
Auto relics, all the numbered cards, the thick cards, the numbered to 8, rubies when you hit them, and 1 of 1s. And so by the time I was done ripping as much as I could, boom, main event hits, 2010. And so that basically has repeated.
That was the domino. Yeah, the domino of round 1.
For like 11 years, outside of a few mistakes of buying too much of one and not buying enough of another. That's probably how things worked until about 2017 or 18 when I slowed down buying a bit. Still bought a lot, but not the same as before.
All right, so I'm gonna take us back, and then we'll catch up to where you left off here. So you get into the UFC, you're able to meet the likes of Rashad as he's on the island that you're working at or living out of at the time. Talk to me. What were some of the earliest fights that really stood out? You mentioned you came into tough, so I imagine, of course, the Forrest Bonner. But like after that, or even before that, can you remember being like a fan of a specific fighter, even if that didn't translate to PCs of on the card side?
Obviously, I think I became a fan of some of the biggest names: Rampage, GSP, pre UFC guys like Wanderlei Silva.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would watch a fight of Wanderlei Silva, and he would be in his corner getting himself pumped up, and he'd be doing this thing with his hands.
So
And
intimidating when I saw that
and
as a kid.
I got scared sitting in my living room. I was getting scared. Why is he doing that? What's he gonna do with his hands? Oh my God, this is scary. And obviously, he looked like a scary dude. And he would not win all the time.
Yeah.
I thought he would be impossible to beat. And then watching a lot of the Pride guys.
Yeah, talk to me about Pride. You watched Pride too, then?
I watched Pride in reruns, not a
In
lot
reruns.
live, but we were getting reruns in different cable stations. And so became a fan of a ton of the Pride fighters. Rampage was in Pride.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Henderson was in Pride. Back then he was Hollywood Henderson. Eventually he became Hendo.
I didn't know that. That's a history lesson
Dan
for me.
Hollywood Henderson.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So they had, I'll call it unusual quality of their television shows. It was a bit cheesy, but fun to watch, and their fights in a boxing ring as opposed to an octagon.
Mm-hmm.
So that was cool. Tons of guys that were amazing to watch. Fedor, Rampage when he was there. Tons of Russian fighters. Fedor's brother was an amazing look. Don Fry.
Okay.
Just crazy fights. So at that point, I was watching as much as I could, and that would include WEC reruns, UFC, Pride. It was basically, try to get as much as I could available whenever it was there. And then I think the tough product hit.
Mm-hmm.
And there you had guys like Lieben, and it was the reality TV time frame.
Yeah, talk to me about that. How old were you at this time?
Oh my gosh, what was the year? That would have been like 2010.
I wish I could remember off the top.
Or because I was actually, I'm out right now. I'm sorting through some old, what I think are main events or Series 4 cards, and I've got the
2004.
2004?
2004. It says the first episode of The Ultimate Fighter aired January 17th,
Okay.
2004.
So I'm sorting through the insert set, and I want to say this is from Series 4 or maybe main event. And there's a picture of Forrest Griffin, and the insert set's got Koscheck and Lieben and Joe Stevens and Rashad and Keith Jardine and Nate Quarry and tons of other guys. And this was Franklin and Hughes as the coaches.
Mm-hmm.
So 2004, I'd have been living in Miami, spending time in Miami and Puerto Rico. And it was definitely something I was addicted to.
Yeah.
Watching the show and the fights within the show, because at that point, I think a lot of people were watching reality TV. And I loved the concept of fighting your way into the UFC, winning a contract, and also this fighting your way into the house.
Yeah, into the house. Those fights don't count on your record, but yeah.
Exactly. Cool. You had to really earn it.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of entertaining fights, and at the same time, I thought it was kind of cool that you could be watching the UFC, you could be watching superstars that were, Hall of Fame type guys, and you could be watching guys that would become superstars, at the same time.
Yeah, if you
And
were a fan of the sport, it was cool to see the Mears and the Coutures and those out of their element as coaches and a different side, on
exactly
TV. Yeah.
when Brock went into being a coach and Rampage was a coach and Tito Ortiz, I can't recall it, Tito Ortiz, who he was against. Was he against Rampage? I can't recall.
No, I don't know. Rampage was against Rashad.
Rampage Rashad. So
Yeah.
Tito might have been against Chuck.
Was
I
it?
think it was Tito and
Let's
Chuck.
see. It makes sense why it would be that, but
Yeah,
let's
I'm
see.
almost certain now because in going back to cards, I think there's a 2009 round
Yeah.
2 had autos. It was Tito and Chuck, and I think back then Roy Nelson was fighting and Brendan Schaub,
Yeah.
and that might have been the time frame Kimbo came on. I can't recall, but I think that it might have been close to the Kimbo dates.
Yeah.
So all this TV available, plus I went to a couple events.
That's exactly where I was going to go. So early on,
Yeah,
what are the live events that you went to? If there's a lot, then the ones that really stick out.
right. The one that probably sticks out the most was one in Boston in 2010. I know that Lausanne fought. I know that BJ Penn fought. But the biggest fight on that card was Couture fighting James Toney, who was a boxer that claimed he could beat any MMA
I
fighter.
remember that fight.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that was either 09 or 10. Actually, I'm pretty sure it was 10.
2010, August 28, 2010, UFC 118, Randy Couture versus James Toney.
And I if we do a little investigating, I'm about 98% sure, but that date coincided very closely with Topps 2010 release of Series 4, because Topps had a very small but important presence at a small fan fest that they had.
Okay.
And I recall buying, I don't know, 6 or 8 boxes. They were all super affordable, maybe less than $40. Because you got so many base cards in there of Series 4 the day or two before that fight at the Fan Fest.
Okay. Yeah,
So
this card was stacked. You had Nate Diaz versus Marcus David, Kenny Florian against Gray Maynard, Damian Maya versus Mario Miranda, Randy Couture versus James Toney, and the main event was Frankie Edgar versus BJ Penn.
BJ Penn.
Yeah,
People were really interested to see Couture fight Toney, and that was my biggest memory of it. Besides the Fan Fest, I recall meeting Buffer at the Fan Fest.
Cool.
Henzo Gracie, Matt Hamill, Vitor Belfort, Efrain Escudero.
Nice.
My wife met walking around outside of the Fan Fest Mark Munoz.
Oh, nice.
She talked to him for a while. So these guys were kind of, all well known to me. I think even John Jones was there. He was very early in his career.
Young.
He was being sponsored by I want to say it was a protein powder company. I can't recall the name of it. But he was so hot, it was impossible to get close to him. You had to stand in lines and stuff. But that was one of my earliest connections. I've been to fights in Mexico City where Verdum beat Cain Velasquez.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I've been to a couple fights in Brazil because I physically happened to be in Brazil when a fight was happening for work. And the other big fight that I went to was when Cruz lost his title to Garbrandt in Las Vegas.
What an event to be at. That was Cody's.
It was like New Year's Eve timing.
Yeah, absolute peak performance. I mean, I would never understand how he managed to look that great, not just for like a round, but the entire fight. And I get they had a ton of footage on him by then, right? So I can understand that aspect of it. Well, we're still talking about a pro athlete versus a pro athlete here, and he made him look like a rookie in there.
Yeah, I mean, he was in so many fights. Dominic Cruz had made his opponents look silly because of his movements that were so unorthodox. But then, Garbrandt goes in there and he's got the dance moves and he's still beating the guy up, which, eventually led to probably my biggest mistake in card collecting.
Oh, no.
When I overpaid in a crazy dash to buy his one-of-one rookie auto 2016. I won against a bunch of my friends, collecting friends,
Yeah.
who were kind of angry with me at the time that have since laughed it off and were happy they lost that win.
I mean, hey, I can't blame you. He really did look like he was going to catapult himself to be
Exactly.
that guy. He was really doing numbers and winning in great fashion, and that right there to win the title that way. And he had like the kid
Sure.
in there that he was also like sponsoring and helping out, and he
Right.
put the belt with him. Yeah, no, I don't blame you. That was a bet that just went wrong, you know.
Exactly.
I couldn't help notice. So that was UFC. Where's the number? It was UFC 207. So the main event on that was Amanda Nunes versus Ronda.
That's right. I was there for that.
Yikes! That's huge. That's
Yeah, not so huge for my Ronda PC, but to see the fight there, it was amazing. A lot of great fights that night.
Man, that's really, really cool. Any other one that you want to highlight, or better yet, do you plan to attend another? Here we go. Any recent fight that you went to you want to highlight, or anyone that you're going to?
No recent fights. I think the most recent fight might have been Kane
Okay.
in Mexico City. Living in Mexico City, not too many fights get here. The last great fight that was here, I had a conflict with my wife's birthday party, and I had to pick my wife over the boys of the UFC. But definitely will go, and definitely have plans to go see some more live events. It's super worth it. It's gotten pretty pricey.
Yeah.
To be in one, and it's all the technology that can come to you via Fight Pass and all the fights that are on TV. At some point it can become a bit difficult to decide, well, do I spend $1,500 on a single ticket to be able to see well, and travel costs and all that?
Yeah.
But it's definitely in the plans. I hope one day to take my boys to see a big fight. So
Yeah.
it'll happen in the near future.
Well, I think we're gonna see each other at International Fight Week because you're gonna be there because of a card show, I believe, during that time, right? Will you
What's
be there?
I'll be in Las Vegas
Yeah. Let me
for a
see.
card show. I don't think that's International Fight Week. I think
June 29th. June 29th is international. It's like the end of
Yeah,
International Fight Week, so it's gonna be leading
right.
into it.
No, June 29th. I think that's a week, a period of time that's I'm between shows. So I'll do a show in a couple of weeks in Northwest Florida, then Miami, then Dallas, then Vegas.
Got
By
it.
the time I get to Vegas, the fight week's over.
Fight week's over.
The guys that run the Vegas show are phenomenal guys.
Yeah.
And I think they do a Pasadena show, a Phoenix show, and a Vegas show. And they do the three of those, and then they do it. Then they repeat again and repeat again and repeat again.
What's the name of the card show?
Front Row.
Front Row
Card show.
I imagine they are like the premier card show.
They're the biggest card show. They're the biggest card show in Vegas. I think like a year ago they were at 300 tables. They just announced the next show in Vegas is at 450.
Wow.
They're at the Rio. Last show I did, they only had 400 tables. So these guys are growing.
Are they big UFC guys?
There's not a lot of other big UFC guys that set up, but there's definitely a lot of big UFC collectors that come through Vegas.
Yeah, I actually mean the front row guys, the ones that you interact with. Are they like, because they're in Vegas and they know they get a lot of probably even athletes that get there? Are they fans of the sport?
They're fans of the sport, and they've even asked me to consider going to one of their other locations.
Yeah.
To bring more UFC to those places. It's just I've kind of committed to Dallas, which is a great show.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of tough to fit in Arizona and really tough to fit in Pasadena because I have to pump up Burbank shows.
Correct.
The Burbank shows that are either in Ontario or in Anaheim are phenomenal.
Yeah,
those guys.
That's where we first got to meet. Yep.
Exactly. Those guys are phenomenal showrunners, and there's also phenomenal collectors in that part of the country as well.
The front row. The reason I asked is maybe it even makes sense to get them on an episode as well. Talk some MMA with them, but ultimately also just try to understand how I could help also put them in front of the right people so that folks go to their shows. If they're going to be in different areas, right, that's the show that you probably want to go to, because most of the best vendors want to be part of their shows.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it. And on the trading card side now, pivoting there. So yeah, you just start buying to build sets. While you're building sets, are you also stashing, like, for every 4 boxes you buy, you're stashing one away? Or at first, was it just ripping through everything?
I ripped too much and never thought into the future, with the
Yeah.
exception of round one and a couple other products. So I've got 4 unopened boxes of round one left. I've got 2 unopened
Cases or just a box?
boxes.
Boxes.
No, if it's cases, I'm wearing a lot more bling than I'm not wearing a Swatch. I'm wearing a Rolex. I think today, I don't think we've ever heard in the last 4 or 5 years of someone that's got a round one case.
A round one case, yeah.
I think that today probably is in the $30,000 to $45,000 range.
Wow.
May never recover that amount that you pay, but it's the thrill
of
opening so many round one cards. You might only hit 1 or 2 red inks, but you hit 1 Gracie and 1 GSP, you might pay for your cost.
You might pay for it.
I didn't think about holding back any other cards until 2019 when my twins were born.
Wow, that's very late.
Yeah, I know. I never thought about it because I was a hoarder. I wanted to see what's in the boxes.
So you have way more product, or up until 2019, you had way more product open, just taken care of, or in top loaders and whatnot.
Exactly. I've got it's all in big monster boxes stored away. So the next product I saved, and it wasn't immediate, but my boys were born in January of 2019. I can't remember when 2019 museum hit, but I saved a case for each one of them.
Okay.
So that they can open down the road if they become fans.
Yeah.
And appreciate card collecting. And then I've probably got 8 or 10 boxes of 2019 Chrome that's still unopened.
Wow. That is insane. Now you off air in other chats that we've had, you've thrown around a rough approximate number of how many cards you think you own. What is that number?
About 500,000 cards.
500,000 cards. And obviously, I don't know if it's obvious, but I one of my questions was like, all there, like at your home, like Jesus, that takes up a lot of your real estate, and you're like, oh no.
No, it actually. Sadly, they're not all in I can't put my hands on all of them.
Yeah.
There's some of my cards at home, some of my cards in a house we rent for a photography studio for my wife. Some of the cards are sitting at my mother-in-law's house, where we have an apartment that we built when we were making some extensions to the house that we have today.
Yep.
And then in Dallas, where I do a lot of shows and fly through in order to get to other shows, I've got a small warehouse. And in Florida, where my sister lives and where I went to high school and college, that's the place where all my pandemic buying sits. And I was a heavy pandemic buyer.
Okay.
So probably there, roughly in the neighborhood of 30 or 35 5,000 count monster boxes between UFC and vintage baseball.
Okay.
But building a new house in Mexico, and there's going to be a card storage room where all of that stuff will eventually come here, and I can get my hands on everything, and hopefully over the next couple of years do a real job of organizing to see exactly what I've got.
Yeah, be showcased properly. A bit premature, but we talked even having a real in-person meetup to showcase what this amazing man cave, man island is going to look like.
It's going to be insane. Yeah. It may be another year and a half from now before it's in a house that's in construction.
Yeah.
But you're 100% welcome to come. We'll do a show, and I think it'll be probably one of the largest. Obviously, I think it's the largest collection of UFC product in the world.
I think so. And from someone that's really passionate about the sport, knows a lot about the Leaf product as well, and the other unofficial ones that have meaning as well and value because of just their era and the youth of UFC cards, you know?
Right.
All right, so where I want to go next is why don't you tell me about the Vegas show that took place in April? You meet someone by the name of Drew. You guys have this massive bromance from what we
Oh,
can.
now hold on now. No. No bromance. I told him brother from another mother. So
Brother
let's
from
not move
another
to
mother.
bromance. My wife likely will watch this, so she needs to know no bromance.
No bromance. No
No
other
bromance.
mances there. But yeah, so
No mances at all.
you guys really hit it off, and it spurs into something that now has been announced. But we really want to give it a lot of the substance and thought behind it. So you guys announced this official partnership of your willingness to let go of some of those 500,000 cards that you own. Why don't you tell me how that came to be? Your thoughts on meeting Drew and your plans
Sure.
over the next few weeks.
Sure. So prior to the card shows, I typically try to make an announcement on Facebook and on Instagram that I'm going to be at a show, give the date, try to pump up a little bit of interest in the show, obviously. And so I did that, and somebody, I'll just call it somebody, it turns out to be Drew. Somebody sent me a message, I believe on Instagram, saying, I saw you're going to be at the show in Las Vegas. Do you have any nice Frank Mir? And, probably 90% of the people that say, do you have any nice, and then
Yeah.
insert the name of a fighter, the answer is yes, unless it's Panini. If it's a 2000 product and recent, unless it's Justin Gaethje, and the answer is sure, bring a check.
Yeah.
So somebody asking me if I want Frank Mir, that's a pretty unusual request. I mean, Frank's been retired for a while and obviously was a great fighter. I've always been a Brock fan, but I still hold a lot of nice Frank Mir cards. Rookie red ink, some one-of-ones because I'm a one-of-one collector as well. And so I got that message and I replied, sure, I've got some and I'll bring them. And that's kind of where things stopped. I didn't know anything more about the person asking the question. And then flash forward to the show in Las Vegas. And I've set up, I can't recall if I think it's Saturday, I've set up and the show's going well. And all of a sudden, this group of people, and I don't want to say that it's just Drew, because this group of people arrive in front of the tables that I've got and introduced themselves and said, I'm looking to get some cards and let's see if we can make a deal, but I've got a card that I know you want. Or maybe it was more like, bear with me, it's a Panini card, but I think you're going to want it. And I want to make sure that you own it because I think you need to own this card. And it's this one.
Yeah, bring it this way. There we go. Yep. And you
You
can
got
also
it.
send
So-
me a picture of this so that I can then plug it in.
Sure.
Post. Yep.
Will do. And I saw it and I said, shit, that's about the only Panini product I've seen where I really like the design because I had seen some examples of global icons, but I never tried to buy any. I never really gone after it. I just liked the design. And so he said, let's try to work out a trade. And by the way, let me introduce you to my family. And his wife was there and two of his kids were there. And so it was really great to meet his family. And then a couple other people that I had already done deals with swing by and they know him and his family. And so I'm going, what's going on here? There's now 7 people in front of me and we start negotiating for a trade on that Connor 1-of-1. And he said, oh, and by the way, I'm the guy that asked you about the Frank Mirs. Oh, wow, I didn't know that you're the guy. So we started having more deep conversations. And he says, I really need to get a great John Jones auto. And I've got to get a great Max Holloway first auto. And I happen to have both of those. And the Max Holloway was, I think, a Pop 3 PSA 10 first auto. And I've got to get a Ronda Rousey auto. And I have to say, without knowing him that much as this is fun as interesting, I have to be fully honest. There's dollar signs going in my brain. But first one is I've got to find a way to trade for this Connor. because he asked for a trade. And I've got to find a way to find these cards that he's looking for. So we have this great conversation. His family they're phenomenal people. And I just enjoy the interaction so much. We come to a deal. We exchange cards and cash. We do a group photo. And for the first time in my life, I've had one of these group photos where one person in the photo is, pointing at me, like making me be the important person in the photo. That had never happened in my life. You see that with sports stars and actors, athletes. But I kind of felt like, wow, maybe I am something special in this little mini tiny world of UFC collecting. And so we did a phenomenal deal. He was happy, I was happy. And then we talked about, hey, why don't we, he talked about it because I'd never heard of or never done anything in Whatnot. He said, I've got a Whatnot channel. Have you ever seen it? I said, no, I don't think I have. I've been on chickens,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't do breaking. I don't pick your fighter. He goes, no, I don't do that. And really, I'm interested to see if I can get a big lot of UFC cards, because we have a group of people that really love UFC cards, and it's tough to find big lots. And so, sure, I said, I'll put together something for you. And we talked about, what he wanted to spend more or less. And then after I started putting them together, he and I started talking, and we both, I think, decided together it's not a case where I want to sell you cards. Why don't we have this partnership where I put part of my collection in your hands, and you do the Whatnot shows, see how the market goes, see if there's interest in it. I'll be happy to jump on the call. And that's how we started the partnership. But there was this feeling like we had been connected before, even though we really hadn't. And it was so much so, and so easy to work with Drew, that a few weeks later, I started pulling cards for him. I filled up more than 2 full monster boxes of cards. Eventually packed them in. When I was at the Dallas show, I packed them into 4 USPS flat rate large boxes, just stuffed with cards. And I put them in the mail to him. Didn't ask for any money. We didn't have an agreement. I just said, here you go. Wow. You're going to have to spend some time organizing them, because they were slightly organized, but my way, which is by series, not by fighter. And he got them on a Wednesday, I believe. I sent them Monday morning from Texas. He got them on a Wednesday. And I think by Wednesday night, he had his first show.
That was the first show. Jeez, that happened fast.
That happened quick. I mean, this guy does not wait and rest.
Yeah.
And he was so shocked at all the stuff that I sent him that he said, wow, this is amazing. I'm going to get the family together. We're going to put it in order. We're going to do a quick show and see how it goes. And since then, I think he's done 3 shows. Mm-hmm. One mega show on Sunday. The first show, which was kind of short, and the last show, which was several hours. But it seems like, I would say, there's been a lot of excellent acceptance of the concept of mm-hmm. his partnership with me, pulling the vintage cards, making them available, both, I'll call it low end and mid end, because we haven't tried the mega cards, but mm-hmm. that's in one of the next steps, because I'll be doing another show with him a few days prior to the Las Vegas card show, where essentially I will bring everything that I would display at the card show, and we're going to see if people have an interest in the big one of ones, and let's say the cards that have a comma in the price.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking to put up a 2013 one of one GSP on card auto with a 30-second $1 auction.
Correct.
That is not going to happen. But if people want to see, red inks, one of one autos, one of one rookies, big gear autos, big mat cards, we're going to give a chance for people to at least physically see them.
Yeah, and get your story
As,
because you
as
speak to them as well, and that adds so
right.
much, a lot of value to it.
Well, thanks very much for saying that. I appreciate that. And I think it's a case of somebody that, like me, who's been around the cards for 14, 15 years and was interested in every series that Topps put out. So I've got too many details that are stuck in my
Yeah.
brain. So much so that important stuff doesn't always get in the brain and stay there. But, little known facts about 2013 triple thread autos and stuff like that stay in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to take a decision if this one's going to make it to the show.
Over here, keep going that way. Nate Diaz. You got to go
Hold on.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. Beautiful.
That's a Ruby rookie auto of Nate Diaz.
And grade it. Bring it down a little bit. 8.5. And the auto is 8.
8.5 and 8 on the auto.
Yeah.
Nate's never had a phenomenal auto, but the most important about this is the historical significance, only 8 of them, etc. So the expectation is just a couple days before the show, we're going to try to do a virtual show.
Yeah.
And also do some auctions and make available some other cards. But so far, things have worked out really well. Drew and his family have phenomenal client service, maybe the best of anybody on Whatnot. I mean,
I agree.
Anything that you buy, the next day it's going to be in the mail. It's going to be with mags or great top loaders, well packed. And so there's a lot of value added things that his family and he bring to a Whatnot show, besides the history that I can bring and the cards that I bring. So it's been a great partnership. The idea is this is not a one and done.
Correct.
This is not a summer bromance. It's not any kind of bromance, but it's not a summer concept. If people are still interested, I can still get Drew more cards similar to what he had. I can up the ante a bit and do a lot more autos. So I told him that I'd started pulling some more autos.
Wow.
And I definitely have a group of autos for him of Anderson Silva,
yes,
Colby Covington rookie autos, Rousey, Nate Diaz, Nick Diaz,
wow,
Brock. I mean, I've got tons. I'm not getting out of the hobby.
Exactly. You're making these cards available to people, but you're not going anywhere.
No, I'm not going anywhere, but I have a bit of a different perspective than I did 7 or 8 or 10 years ago. I don't need to have everything like I used to think I did.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time, particularly if I've got 3 of the same auto, maybe it's time to put one available, because there's a lot of collectors. And to me, this is also important. There's tons of collectors that got into collecting in the last 5 years, some in the last 2 or 3. That may have been fans of the sport for a long time, but were never around in 2013 or 14 or 15.
That's right.
To open boxes and pick up those cards. And not all of them are always going to be available on eBay. And certainly the feel and the look of eBay is much different than you get in buying through Drew's process.
Yeah.
And so if people are still interested, I'm happy to continue to provide similar cards, a little bit higher end, and some super high end stuff.
Yeah, and folks, I want to let you know we're going to have Drew on too in a later episode, because honestly, his background is as impressive. What he brings to it, the amount of time he's spent in the industry, is a lot of the reason that he's able to provide the customer service and the quality that he does now. It transfers over, right? Like, he's been in the space.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people are new to the Card Savant, but he is not new to the hobby, and I'm excited to also tell his story for you guys.
Absolutely.
Two things, Eric, before we get you out of here.
Don't let him say romance. Don't let him say romance.
Before we get you out of here, it's funny you mentioned that people are getting into the hobby now and they weren't around before. So that's like a big reason as well. Someone literally 3 days ago that story, hit me up on Instagram. Hey, I saw your reel. I've been a fan of the UFC. Used to collect other cards. I've been hearing about these round 1, round 2 cards. Do you think those are like the ones to go after? And so like we went down that chain of like, yeah, absolutely. And he wants to create a set as well of round 1. I
Cool.
was like, yeah. So there was that, and then the last thing is when's the next show? Actually, why don't you tell folks about the live show that will take place in July?
Sure. It should be, and let me just get out a calendar and put on my old man glasses.
No worries.
But before I get to that, just a reminder, if you are in Northwest Florida, there's a tiny show in a place called Milton the weekend of Father's Day. Then the following weekend, around the 21st, I'm doing Hobby Slam in Miami. And in all of these shows, except for Dallas, I'll have 4 big tables. So I've got tons of space to put out a lot of cards, and I'm going to try to do a better job of putting out some mid-range or lower-range cards that people can flip through by fighter name.
Great.
Then the July 4th is Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And July 12th, 13th, 14th time frame is Vegas. So our show is being planned for July 10th. Wednesday, perfect. July 10th. Don't know the timing. I think he usually likes his shows at 11:11 or 12:11.
Okay.
So it might be in more towards the afternoon, but we may need to be together for quite some time so that we can display the typical cards that I have at a card show, because that's the concept of what we wanted to make available to people if they're interested, is essentially a virtual card show.
Yeah. That's
live. It won't be a ton of auctions because when I'm at a card show, I don't do auctions. Everything's
Correct.
Priced.
Correct.
Everything, obviously, as is everything in this world, is subject to some level of negotiation. So I may be willing to, move a little bit on my prices. People may say, oh, I see a comp of X on that price. Will you accept Y?
Yeah.
My 2 ears listen okay. But, not always depending on the offer, because these are historical cards. A lot of the stuff I've got, obviously the one-of-ones, no one else can have.
Yeah, we haven't even touched on that, which is for another episode.
Yeah, I would love to do a one-of-one episode.
Yeah.
That would be awesome, because I'm one of the biggest one-of-one collectors,
yeah.
But there's several other guys that are massive one-of-one collectors.
Yeah.
And hopefully you have a chance to get some of those guys as well to tell you their stories.
I'm going to have to get some names from you as well.
Yep, I'll be happy to drop some names.
All right, let me get you out of here. So, guys, we will have another part of this, a one-on-one part, a little bit more of also what Eric did for a living that allowed him to also, play in the space the way he has. That's another question that we ran out of time today. But cool. Until next time, this has been Doers Take Breaks. We are out, y'all.
Is this thing on?